Hi,
Hi.
Katherine. So good to see you today.
Good. Hello, my name is Katherine. I go by Kat. And I'm a coach in this field of trauma and abuse, narcissistic abuse specifically. My personal story is that I'm the daughter of a narcissist, and I found myself in a series of unhealthy relationships in my 20s, and I was seeking answers to the pattern. I just had a lot of questions, and I found those answers in just my friend saying, I think your boyfriend's a narcissist, and that opened up gaslighting and parentification and emotional abuse and manipulation and all of these things, codependency, boundary setting. So I went on and I got a degree in psychology and started a platform on TikTok, carried it over to Instagram. We're going on YouTube and just raising awareness on this topic, the topic that provided me with so much clarity. And now I know a lot of other people experiencing this. It provides them clarity as well.
Yeah.
All my pages are Katherine Kleis now.
Yeah. Quite a story. It's similar to mine. I had a practice. Seemingly life was doing fine. I was in a long-term relationship and a marriage, and then the marriage ended when my husband passed away from cancer. And I ended up dating really fast and not aware that they were toxic people, even though I grew up in not the most healthiest homes. When you don't have a language, and I think that's what I heard out of your story, and the same for mine, and I hear this so much from the people that we interact with, when you don't have a language to know what's going on, then you really can't identify what you're experiencing, and it's very easy to personalize and think there's something wrong with you, instead of realizing there's something going wrong in the situation or going wrong in the relationship, or that maybe what's going wrong is in the other person and that you're just experiencing what's happening. But I ended up in a second marriage. I think now, if I was to diagnose him, I think he's a narcissistic sociopath. And it was basically a con. The whole marriage was a con. So it literally, he targeted, set me up, and then it was for money, which is just horrified me. So I got out, and I didn't have a language to understand what happened either. I knew it was abuse. I didn't know it was abusive. I knew it was bad, and I knew it was wrong, but I wouldn't have said that there was, and I even recognized some of the gaslighting when it was happening in the moment, and I knew it was manipulation, but I never put that word to it and said, oh, you're manipulating me, or this is a manipulation, or you're trying to exploit me. I didn't put it in that kind of frame, and instead I experienced it as it was happening, and it's so as I started to write the story of Love You More, I began to unpack all of this and kind of stumbled into narcissistic abuse backwards. I found TikTok, I was watching TikTok for almost a year, following a lot of comedy people, and just sort of stumbled in. I don't know if it was Lee with Mental Illness's page first, or if it was Lisa Sony with Trauma Bond, but I sort of back-ended into that area and started listening. I think Cynthia or Sinful was another really big name that I appreciated her skits. The skits were like, oh my goodness, were you a fly on the wall? How did you know that? It was stunning to me, the similarities of our stories. And now that I've heard so many more, I continue to think, where is that damn Blake books? Go, we can burn it, because it is amazing how almost word for word people will say things that are the same. It's just shocking. It's shocking. Yeah.
It's almost always the same story. It's wild. And for those of you following me, Kerry mentioned her book, Love You More. I just finished it.
Oh, did you?
Wild story. Yeah, that was a wild story.
Yeah. Were you shocked by any of it?
I was really, it was like I was on the edge of my seat towards the end, where I was like, how is she going to get out of this? Because I saw you trying to regain control of the situation, and now you're playing the game. And you're like, I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna hold my deck of cards, and I'm gonna wait to see when he hits a level of desperation.
Yeah.
And I'm like dying for that to play out. And I'm glad. I'm happy with the ending of your story. But
yeah, that's the hard part, and I wonder if you're okay if I jump into this. One of the things I hear a lot is people who are caught in a toxic relationship don't know how to end it, and they know that if they just end it, they're going to lose a lot. They may lose, maybe they're fearing custody issues, or maybe they're fearing a loss of income. I just had a conversation with someone this week where I think they own the house, and this person's basically been living off of them, and they're worried they're going to have to pay alimony and lose half of the value of the house. And in my story, it was the same. I mean, he was also, I had, just like these other people, funded his lifestyle, funded him, and provided for everything that we had, the house and the company and everything. And like those that I hear from, I didn't want to lose any of it. I mean, it felt unfair and wrong. Is that something you hear a lot as well, Kate? I'm sorry, Kat.
Mm-hmm.
And because I want to start to say Katherine, and no, she said Kat. Is that what you hear a lot, Kat?
Yeah, I definitely hear it a lot. Sometimes it really is very real like that, but a lot of it, I think, is a perceived fear where they're just like, well, I'll take this and this from you. And they don't have any rights to do that. And I have to talk people like, well, is that actually going to happen though? And, but that's definitely a huge fear that a lot of people deal with it when it gets to the point where you're like legally married, both of your names are on things, the bills. It's a huge barrier to leaving.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is a huge barrier. I had somebody who read through the story and heard it said, I don't know why you just didn't give him half. Just get the person out of your life. Just that wouldn't have been simpler. And I think for a lot of us, it's not that simple. It feels like, here's what it felt like for me. And I would love to know from the audience, those who are listening, who are in the throes of this right now, or maybe you're considering leaving and you haven't left. It felt like to me, he hadn't earned that. It would throw me into a lifestyle I didn't want. I would have to go back to doing what I'd done, earning income, working in another industry in order to be able to survive. It would put me back into survival mode, living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't want to do, and plus he hadn't earned any of it. I spent 30, 40 years. We're talking, I'm moving towards retirement. He's going to consume my retirement, and I'm going to have to go back as if I'm in my 40s. Mm-hmm. And go back to working full time when I was trying to retire. And plus, we're also, I'm going to be very, I usually don't always say this. Part of it was a payout of a life insurance on my late husband. I'm going to give him a payout on my life insurance on a marriage that was faithful and committed. It was, it was beyond my tolerance. That's how it felt, beyond my tolerance. And so for me, I stayed and played the game because I wanted to win. And I figured I could. I figured I knew him well enough that I could beat him at it because he was too impulsive, and I knew that. So what I want to tell people who are listening, who are stuck in this, I think you have to be very pragmatic. I knew I had leverage. I knew this guy got into trouble and he would need money. I knew that. But maybe your partner doesn't, maybe you're not going to, maybe the leverage will never swing in your direction, and you have to be pragmatic. If I was in a different situation, I would have probably had just to swallow and do that. Yeah. As it is, he still ended up, those who not read, by the way, a prenup wouldn't have worked. I was in another country. I wasn't in the United States. The law of the United States didn't apply. So that wouldn't have worked. I already knew that. And I already sought legal advice. I already knew that I didn't have a leg to stand on legally. So, but he did end up with a lot of money he didn't earn, but it wasn't what he wanted. And that's what it didn't put me back where I lost my retirement. So in a way I won, but he got something too. It wasn't like he walked out with nothing, which I would have loved. So what do you think when people, because I know that's a common experience that you feel, I heard another educator in narcissism, another clinician in narcissism say that when we leave a narcissist or a toxic person, they make sure that there is mass destruction. Our life is going to be blown up, whether we like it or not. So what do you say when you encounter that kind of situation?
Well, I definitely tell them to weigh the risk and reward, because sometimes it's like, well, they have my straightener and they have this, and and it's
or the dog. I've heard that a lot.
Buy a new straightener, right? Like those, there's a lot of, you're going to have to take some losses, I think, for the bigger picture of the piece. But when it comes to situations like yours, or where it would be more drastic, more devastating, going back, you're trying to retire. This is like life insurance. That I'm just very supportive through it and listen. And I offer perspective and advice and things to consider. But I typically refer those people to a lawyer in that state that they're living in, you know, take advantage of the resources in your area. Call a lawyer. Oftentimes they give a 1-hour free consultation. Make sure that you have your list of questions prepared ahead of time. We can meet and prepare those questions together, right? Otherwise, I know SJ does a lot of navigating through the legal system. So it just depends on if it's a legal matter, you know, what resource I'm going to throw at my clients.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I walked away with, that I really want to urge people, and don't just see one person. Don't have one consultation. Right. See many different individuals. Seek out. That's one thing I didn't do. I got one attorney's opinion, and now that I'm now 3 years away, I've heard more. I've learned a lot more, and I realized the advice that I got wasn't necessarily the best advice. So if I had heard other people's opinion, if I had been less scared, I think that's one thing that I see happen a lot. It happened to me, is that we're so overwhelmed by what's happening and we're being intimidated. I mean, yeah, last night I was on I have a membership group and we do once a month Zoom calls. So we hang out and talk. And one of the persons was right now leaving and she can hardly speak. She's so under this person's thumb and so shut down and controlled that doing even like advocating for yourself in the middle of an argument is hard. The idea of going out and talking to a professional or seeking many professionals probably feels nearly like climbing Mount Everest, nearly insurmountable. But I want to urge anyone, this is the error that I made. I was in that space, I didn't do more. And if I'd done more, I probably would have gotten better advice and he may have gotten less. Mm-hmm. But I didn't, because it was just all too much.
So overwhelming. It really is a village. Like it takes a village. It's not one person, right? Like maybe you got bad legal advice. Some people get bad advice from therapists or coaches sometimes, right? That does happen. So you want all the resources. You want to be talking to multiple outlets and trying to get all your ducks in a row. But you're right. There's so much fear going on. There's so much control and there's so much brainwashing. And then on top of that, you're emotionally exhausted and to the point where it's manifesting itself physically. You don't want to get out of bed. You're tired. You can't think straight. You're not as sharp and energized. It's just a lot.
Yeah, it is. You know, and the hard part is that the world. So let me ask you this. I know that you grew up in a family with a narcissist, and I grew up in a family with personality disorders as well. So I had the same experience as you did. Mm-hmm. I found being a child in a toxic home is different than being in a toxic relationship. Yeah. And so I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have a love relationship, a pathological love relationship, that it's a whole nother level of domination, really, of complete loss of self in that. Mm-hmm. It's so when those watching, and like I used to be part of the watching world, watching people in a bad relationship, I had no clue. Was it same for you? Were you stunned at what it was like to be on the inside of a pathological relationship?
I was stunned. How do I say this? In a pathological relationship, I had two. So by the time the second one came around, I felt much more aware. Even though I still didn't have the language, I had the understanding. So the first time I got into a pathological relationship, unfortunately, it wasn't actually very stunning to me because I had went directly from a violent home into a violent relationship. And it was more of a love story. It was like, no one understands, and I was a teenager and your friends are telling you like, he's bad. And it's like, but you don't know him and you don't know his story and his childhood and he has abandonment issues, and none of that's an excuse to be putting someone in pain. And it's all more common than I think I knew at the time. But it wasn't long. I mean, relatively speaking, it was like a year and a half in and I was like, all right, I'm done excusing this and I want to get out. And it was a year and a half exit strategy. It took me a year and a half to get out of that. But I was like 19. I was like, I am not going to live this way for the next 80 years. I'm not.
Yeah, Yeah, I have to say, I didn't even have that mindset. I mean, the person in the book is probably a little stronger than the person who actually lived that story. I mean, you know, what's hard about writing is you can't reflect the ambiguity well. It's very hard to get all of that. I mean, anybody who's experienced cognitive dissonance knows that both realities are true.
Mm-hmm.
You love this person and you desperately want to get out of it. It's hard to reflect cognitive dissonance in a storyline. Just now, even now that I have words for it, I didn't even have words for that. Now that I have words for it, I probably would have written part of it a little bit differently. But yeah, I wish I kept seeing the potential, and I was in love with the potential. Yeah. And I kept thinking if we could save him, that then we'd save the relationship and then nothing would need to change, because change is so hard, and I already had done it several times. No. But but at the same time, I also knew that he was dangerous and scary and intimidating me. You know, it's weird. It's weird to live in this dichotomy of both worlds at the same time.
I think that's what was shocking for me was the second relationship. There was a mask, but when the mask came off, that's when I was shocked. Because this one was much more psychological. I want to say he was smarter, but he was just smarter at what he did. The gaslighting and the manipulation, the grooming, to be aware that this is a controlling abuser and I deserve better while being groomed, while being in cognitive dissonance. That was shocking to me. Like, I know this. I've been through this. I broke up with him almost immediately when I learned about narcissism. And then I'm still in this trauma bond, you know?
Yeah. It was, I got to the place, and this is the third stage of cognitive dissonance, where the first stage is you think, oh my goodness, who am I in a relationship with? Are they good or bad? That's when you make the discovery of some kind of like mask slip and you see a piece of the real self. And then you get into the relationship and it continues to start falling apart and you say, oh, is this a good relationship? Should I be in this relationship? And finally, the last stage, if you make it there, hopefully most of us get out before that point, but you end up saying something's wrong with me. I know this is a bad relationship. I know this person is not always good, but why can't I leave? And man, that place, it is beyond description. It is.
I can't describe it.
You know,
to this.
And either it is the most horrific, agonizing spot when you don't even know yourself anymore and you don't even have respect for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you can't tell anybody because you have so much shame.
Yeah.
You know, and you know you'll get piled on with more shame around you. If you say something, they'll look at you and say, yeah, that's weak. Why are you putting up with that? So you just don't say anything and it's awful. It's awful.
I think you did great at putting words to that. It really is like that. It's like that third stage. I have a video. It brought me to tears. It's, I think, probably the only video I have on my TikTok where I'm crying and speaking. And it was the moment I realized I left that stage of cognitive dissonance to go from feeling, like you said, I don't respect myself. I don't even know who I am. I'm convinced that this whole thing is me, to the day that my friend had me Google narcissism and I realized it's not me. And like just the relief to know, like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. I'm not an abuser. I'm not like this monster that I thought I was a monster.
Yeah. I just thought I was broken. I felt very, very broken. Yeah. And now that I know what I know, the person I got in a relationship with set it up.
Yeah.
The whole thing was set. He's that good. I have a feeling that I don't think I actually ever saw the real person. I think he's such a monster. In fact, I had a moment, and that moment is, did put it in the book, and it is literal. It is exactly what happened, where I leaned forward and I said, I heard on a podcast that this woman was married to someone, and she said, I thought I'd married a good guy who sometimes wore a monster mask. But I realized I'd married a monster who sometimes wore a good guy mask. And my ex literally went white, almost gray white, sick. He leaned forward, got real close to my ear and said, I'm glad you know.
I honestly, that was the biggest takeaway from your book. Like that one like hit me, that part of your book. And the fact that he admitted it, and then I like it hit me, it spoke to me so much. In a YouTube video I recorded today, I used that monster. Are they a monster in a good guy mask or a good guy in a monster mask?
Yeah. He would get drunk, sometimes falling down drunk, and he would say, oh, if you only knew, if you really only knew. And he told me a lot of really bad things, and I kept thinking, what is he not saying? What if I really, now that I know what I know, is, well, one of the things, if I only knew, is he was trying to kill me. So, I mean, and
that's, you asked if anything in your book surprised me. Was he poisoning you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm convinced he was. I don't have proof of it, but I'm convinced. He leaned in, Chris, and said, I'm glad you know that I'm a monster. Yeah, I believe he was, I have all the symptoms, and I even talked to a poison control nurse afterwards. In the moment, I suspected, I didn't put together my symptoms of illness to poisoning, even though it was really intermittent. But I knew the symptoms I was having was very weird and extremely bad. I mean, I'm going to gross everybody else out for a second, but one of the things arsenic does is it gives you have diarrhea that looks like you have cholera. It's called rice diarrhea. It's water. It's clear water that pours through you. And that would happen. I've never had that have you ever had that in your life? Clear water pour through you? And it would happen for days. And one of the other weird moments I had was, and he was calm. Now that I stand back and look at it, his reaction was odd. We were getting ready and getting out of the house in the morning, and I had taken my morning medication on an empty stomach. I always do that, guys. I do that every day. I have no problem doing that. I was in the car. I started salivating. Like, you ever see a picture of a rabid dog with it's pouring out of my mouth. Salivation's pouring out of my mouth, and I'm throwing up salivation. And he calmly hands me a bag to throw up in. And we never talk about it. Like, now that I stand back, like, he wasn't surprised. He knew this was a symptom.
That's what I was going to ask him. Like, so has he done this to others?
Yeah. He had been married before, and one of the other wives spontaneously in the interview for the book said, I think he was poisoning me. I wanted to drop the phone. I couldn't believe she told me that. I was left with 2 years of symptoms of, I would have these, I would take to bed. Something would go wrong, and I would, my belly, my abdomen would get fluid in it. And I would take to bed and be sick for days. And I was doing all sorts of CAT scan, trying to figure out why, but it's cleared up. All of that's cleared up. So yeah, it left me kind of ill for a period of time. And I now live with fatty liver disease. It does damage the liver. I also have, I'm pre-diabetic. It brings on diabetes. So it damages some of the organs like that. So now I show signs of disease from that. I didn't have those disease before I went into this relationship. And the other really weird thing is my urine was discolored, looked like the color of tea, and it was frothing, was foaming, like a latte on top. And I knew I was spilling protein. I knew that's a sign that my kidneys are failing, that I'm having, but again, where do you go? And I had lines across all my fingernails, my toenails. I mean, I remember researching what white lines. What, pardon me?
Your gums were bleeding?
Gums were bleeding, yeah. It was, yeah, and then I collapsed on a plane, and then there was a doctor on board, and he thought, I saw his report to the airline. He wrote into the airline report, she either suffered a heart attack or has had a mild stroke. So I didn't. I mean, I was cleared on both of those. I had a big complete workup when I got back to the United States, but I was very ill. And see, he stood to inherit a lot of money. That was the thing is that if I died, everything went to him. And when it started, just hit me recently. It started when the construction of our company finished and we opened the company. So officially when we started like the business, that's when I started getting sick.
Convenient.
I know, very convenient. So when you stand back, yeah, and he had said to me, life had never been fair to him. Why should it be fair to me? So he really felt like it wasn't that he was blessed by what I brought into the relationship. He felt angry and envious of what I had.
Yeah, a sense of entitlement.
Yeah. So, and you know, the sad thing is someone just this week contacted me and they think their husband is actually poisoning them. And you know what, when she started telling me what stuff, I got scared for her. I think it's potentially real. I think she probably is being poisoned. And this person has the means, the intelligence, the opportunity, and the skill. So it's like, you know, and what was odd, and this was the same for me, she was telling me, I think this is happening to me. I thought she knew, she's saying, this is happening to me. And then I began to hear the story and I'm getting scared for her and said, yeah, I really think you need to get out of there. You need help. And these are the things I would do. And then she said, now you're scaring me. She was like me. It's like, I don't, you know, I think maybe, but probably not. I'm probably overreacting. But yet when I heard it, I think, oh, crud. I mean, this woman is really ill, you know?
Get a tox screen.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said, you need a heavy metal tox screen. Definitely. Yeah.
Scary, because there's still this huge stigma around even talking about emotional abuse or narcissism. Obviously, poisoning is a step further, but like, oh, so they were selfish and called you a name, or they invalidated your feelings. And it's like, we're literally dealing with the psychopaths here. Actually, earlier someone asked what's the difference between a sociopath and a narcissist.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your explanation, but first I'd just like to say, we're talking like they're on that level though. Okay, like we are dealing with the most dangerous people in the world when we talk about narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths.
Yes, we are. That's who does really bad things. Not every person. Yeah, not every person who has these diagnoses do really bad things, but those who do really bad things have this diagnosis. Yes. So, in fact, other people right now are writing in what's like somebody just said that their ex would take her toothbrush and run it through the toilet. I mean, do really awful stuff to make her sick. Somebody else shared with me that her ex was purposely trying to expose her to things. I mean, it was you know, horrible to make her sick, you know? Yeah. So let's talk about and I know people are like, oh, this is really triggering. It is really triggering. Yeah, it is upsetting. So, and also people are asking, how am I doing with my sister's loss? But we can talk about that too. So a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, borderline, and histrionic are all part of a cluster B group in the DSM-5. So the DSM-5 in personality disorders is broken into 3 sections. There's group A's, B's, and C's. And B group is called the antagonistic group. There's actually 10 personality disorders. 4 of them make up in group B, the cluster B. So I'm not going to talk about borderlines or histrionic. They're a little different and they present a little differently. And yes, they can be really toxic. You certainly could have an abusive relationship with somebody who has that. But I want to talk about the ones who are a little more likely to break the law, more likely to be purposefully deceptive. Yeah, borderlines can be deceptive, but for the most part, most of those with BPD don't try to be. They just want to be loved and then get hurt with their impulsive kind of over the top neediness and difficulty with regulation. So I want to leave out that group because of they're just different. So narcissists and psychopaths, sociopaths. So let's take narcissists first. Narcissist is considered a biosocial problem, meaning when they looked at identical twin studies, 70% of the twins were both narcissistic. So there's a huge component that's genetically based, which is why you see it running through families. It is not, I want to dispel this, it is not related to trauma. That has been a common theory, but has actually been disproved. They've done studies to control for that. They find that part doesn't make any difference. But it is socially activated. We don't know how, but something happens. And it could be as innocently as maybe it's not a good infant-parent match. Maybe there's stress in the family. Maybe because of cultural or economic pressures or ethnicity pressures, that they are in a deprivation or in a, you know, not in a best kind of environment, or it could be due to abuse, or it could be due to trauma, but something happens that activates this genetic predisposition. And then what they do is they present with 9 different criteria. And really, when you stand back, and this is based on the alternate model of identification or diagnosis, there's 2 different models now is being proposed. One is based on criteria. You need 5 out of the 9 criteria. And the other is they look at 4 different big, large, general areas of functioning, and you see deficits in these 4 areas of functioning. And the 4 areas, and I hope I can say them all, is one is self-directed or self-initiation. The second is intimacy. Third has to do with empathy. And the last one has to do with identity. So they have problems with all 4 arenas in various ways. All of the personality disorders has a problem in all 4 of these areas, but they present differently. That's how you know whether or not it's narcissistic versus whether it's OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, is how they deal with these 4 arenas of self-direction, intimacy, empathy, and identity, how they deal with these 4 different areas. So for a narcissist, let's take the narcissist and then take the antisocial personality disorder. The narcissist is going to struggle with self-direction. If you've noticed, they tend to be very distractible and bored. They're restless. They move from idea to idea. They don't follow things through very well. They show a lot of impulsivity, a lot of not really good judgment. When it comes to intimacy, they tend to be, they're really good at making initial connections. That's what happens in love bombing. They're super good at the selling part, but they can't do anything long-term. They don't know how to really show up vulnerably and be authentic. And then when it comes to the identity, they're kind of like a insecure, shallow definition of themselves. It's way too flexible, and it's very avoidant of shame. It doesn't hold up well under stress. They're not good with managing their emotions. They really struggle with regulation. Where a borderline struggles with regulation and ends up being impulsive, a narcissist struggles with regulation and they shut down. They compartmentalize, they deny, they block off. They kind of shut off affect, where histrionic and borderlines tend to be more dramatic and more kind of overshow it. And then the last area is empathy. They really struggle to connect and know what anyone else is feeling or going through, and having any kind of, because they're very egocentric. The whole world is themselves. So that is a narcissist. Now, antisocial personality disorder is both a psychopath and a sociopath. Well, what's the difference about that? Some people say there is no difference. Some people say that these are all kind of made up. If you want to look into it more, Robert Hare's work is a really good person to read his work. He does think there are differences. The main way he identifies the differences is psychopaths tend to be more born. They're kind of more cold and calculating. They're not impulsive. They're better planners. They're more calculating. Whereas a sociopath tends to be more made. They tend to be more reckless, impulsive, hot-headed. So that would be a difference of, if you're going to talk about homicide, difference from planning out strategy, calculated, versus somebody who's in the heat of the moment, gets pissed off and loses it. Now, which is more dangerous? Which, you want to guess which one of those 2 is more dangerous?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I would want to say the calculated one, but hotheads are,
it's the hothead.
Yeah, the hothead.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, they're the more dangerous one because they're more unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be more reactive. So if you take those 4 arenas on, let's go back to those 4 areas of functioning. For antisocial personality disorder, they can be self-directed, but it's very egocentric, so if they're the psychopath, yeah, they're self-directed, but it's only to benefit themselves. They don't see themselves as part of the larger whole. They would see it as everybody else for themselves. So they wouldn't mind breaking the law, breaking rules. It's all for their needs. When it comes to empathy, they don't have any. So again, they can't relate to what you're going through, and they don't care about your pain or have a sense of you. You're really no more significant to them than an insect would be. And when it comes to intimacy, they don't really show up, and they can't expose themselves and share because they see the world competitively. So why would you do that? That would be just stupid and too risky. And then when it comes to their own identity, they're actually, theoretically, it's thought of them that they may be rather empty, hollow. There's not much of a self. It's in fact, that some of this, what they do is because of this emptiness is they like excitement. They're using adrenaline and fear as a way to give them purpose and to feel alive because of how empty inside they are.
think it's an absence of identity.
Almost. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, isn't it? I mean, yeah.
One thing that I'm having just a hard time wrapping my head around, though, is all of my studies have showed that narcissism is trauma-based. So I want, when was this dispelled in these studies, what were these controlled studies and how controlled?
Yeah, so I will get happy to share the reference to you. It comes out of Dr. Gregory Lester's work. He is probably, I would say, one of the top speakers on personality disorders in the country. He was on the DSM-5 personality committee.
Okay.
So he does training, educational training for clinicians through APA. And I have his reference list of the studies that he was looking at. He said he feels it's pretty, he said to the in this training, he said he feels very confident that research is spoken and that we know. That's what he said. So
my thing with the twins, though, that I just want to, for to be a devil's advocate, the twin studies, it's like, okay, you could say that 70% proves the biological component, but couldn't you also say it proves the cultural component too?
Usually when they do, that's a great question, because you're right. You're saying same environment. Why would you get different results? But usually a lot of these twin studies, they try to also look at twins who've been separated.
Yeah. Okay.
To help validate the fact that it's genetically related, because then you could say, no, a different environment, same genetics, but different environment and still same outcome.
Which is crazy, because how you're finding displaced twins with one of the most rare diagnosed personalities.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to go back and look at what he's referencing, but I can give you that. I can share that with you.
I love that.
Yeah, in fact, somebody just asked me recently, and I think it's a great idea. It would take me some work, so I'm going to have to slow down and to do this. But I'm going to start for 2023 a reference page and break it down by categories so that you know where my info is coming from, because I really try to be research. If you notice, I really try to be research based. I tend not to say something off the cuff. I want to make sure that I know why I'm saying it and where it's coming from, and then I can back it up. And I agree. Here's one thing people may not appreciate about research, and somebody just was saying this about the DSM-5, and I agree with the person. They said you can't rely strictly on the DSM-5 either. Everything it has to be repeatable, replicated. It has to be the abstract concepts have to be solidly defined and valid. That's, how high is the validity? You also want a good, decent subject size. Yeah. It has to be over 30 is the base. If you see a study of 10 people, that is not solid research. That's just anecdotal material. So you need a solid research, and it has to be controlling for the variables but that's the hard part. See, we don't always know variables that can be confounding, like you just said, same environment that could be the trigger. How do we know that? But here's one thing they did do. I think this is the way that they tested the trauma piece. They took a group of people who were traumatized, and then we took the group of narcissists and then compared and contrasted them against each other. And they found that trauma didn't predict that. If it did, then everybody who's had trauma, and all of us, we would become narcissistic. We're not.
Right. Well, yeah, and I totally hear that. That part I completely agree with, because out of trauma you can get codependent people
from Katherine's MacBook Pro.
You can get
you love
Alexa. You can get codependent people pleasers. You can get borderlines. You can get narcissists. So I guess my thing was, definitely they must have a biological component or a temperament. Dr. Ramani says it's a temperament, right? They have that fight response. And I want to say that combined with the trauma, just my mind's having a hard time with trauma, not with this biological predisposition, this temperament, having trauma and not having trauma, the results being the same. They're just going to be a narcissist, or being raised entitled versus not being raised entitled, right?
Yeah, the old theory was, and this is what I was trained in. I was trained in a developmental model, which said that it's something that it doesn't mean we're putting the blame on mom and dad. We're just saying that around the age of 12 months to 3 years, something happened, and they didn't progress to the next stage of development. Yeah, that it was a wound. I agree with you, Annika, that it's a wound that happens, and the wounding causes a stunted to the development. But now they're saying, well, yes, so that's the other thing that's complicated about all of this, is that you have a brain that at birth is really not mature. I mean, the least mature of all animals born on the earth, the human baby has the most immature neurology at birth. It has 27 years of growth ahead of it before it's done. So here you have this very immature structure that's now being shaped in real life, in a uncontrolled situation. A lot can go wrong, and when it goes wrong, it impacts neurology. It impacts wiring and what areas grow and what areas don't grow. And I mean, it's so to understand this is hard.
Yes,
because there's so many variables that we can't really measure well. So I think this is part of our struggle. We struggle to talk about this because it's just there's a lot we don't know.
Well, that's true in all fields of science and experimenting. There's confounding variables. Like, I don't know what is or isn't a variable.
Yeah.
But I touch on something you said about, like, we're not blaming the parents. This is just something that happened at this developmental phase. But I think my question for you is, do you think that there should be more awareness raised on parenting, or what you could have done that was damaging developmentally? Because when you look at conduct disorder or other behavioral disorders in children that lead to antisocial personality disorder, the reason that it's hard to treat those children is because a lot of it is psychoeducation for the parent. This is what I learned. The book told me that it's the parents' closed-mindedness to them needing any psychoeducation to help their child developmentally. That was what was hurting their child further, or stopping it from correcting it.
Yeah, well, here, can I make it even more complicated?
Sure.
So I was raising children. I raised millennials and Gen Z. So that's the ages my kids are. My kids are your age, roughly. And when the 90s were happening, when I was giving birth, there was a big popular movement of children first. It was actually public service announcements. We don't have public service announcements on TV nowadays, but we used to. And they would just say children first. And there was a lot of material coming out about providing a perfect enough emotional environment that you raise a healthy kid in. As a result, we did things like give everybody a trophy for showing up for soccer, or all of this stuff. Do you know what, though? The rates of narcissism in millennial and Gen Zs is through the roof. So even when we thought we were helping by like reducing deprivation, we worsened it. Now, I'm not saying let's go back to the 1940s and 50s where they would lay the baby down and let them cry it out and nobody came. It was even anti-holding because that might spoil a child. So yes, we've had different types of rearing patterns through the years. And often these rearing patterns, even though they're well-meaning, tend to, if we're not healthy, we won't use them in a right way.
Okay.
That's where I guess that's what I'm saying is that I think whatever instructions we give, people who are not well will not use it well.
Yeah.
Which is
Thank you for
sad, because it really comes back to then how do we make our whole society healthier?
Yeah.
And I once asked a clinical psychologist who was my superior, my senior. He'd seen a lot more in life, and he actually was a disciplinary chairman for the state. So he saw psychologists who were in trouble. He was involved in the censorship of them. And I said to him, what percentage of population do you think is actually healthy? And he said 7%.
Yeah.
So we're talking 93% of the world is not very well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that means you can't walk out and not hit somebody who probably is not functioning very well.
Well, you know, my therapist also said most family dynamics are dysfunctional. There's too much codependency. There's this like dysfunctional dynamic that a lot of us go through. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to that have been victims of narcissistic abuse and came into this information go out in the world and they're like, I see it in my neighbor, I see it in my boss. Like, is it me or is it everywhere? And it is everywhere. And once you see it now, it is hard to go out in the world and see, once you learn about dysfunctional attachment, whether it's romantic or just friendships or work, and you see it everywhere you go, you kind of want to hide in your house.
Yeah, and I kind of wish now, the more I learn about it, I wish we didn't call it narcissistic abuse, because it's not actually related just to narcissists. Mm-hmm. It's actually, I think what we're really trying to describe is a way of invalidating and minimizing other people, and a failure to respect and appreciate everyone's rights to be fully celebrated and encouraged. We limit each other's space. We limit each other's emotions, and we don't respect your needs against my needs. My needs are more important, so I'll step on you in the process. I wish we'd named it something a little different, because I think it's way broader than just a diagnosis in the DSM-5.
Yeah. I feel like I've been gravitating towards using emotional abuse more, or emotional within the context of a relationship, because it's the thing that the word narcissist provided me was direction to what's gaslighting, what's brainwashing, like what are all these things that are happening, these tactics. Like that's all that word did for me. But I think a lot of people do get hung up on it. At like that's the end all be all, or like they're not a narcissist. They do all these things, but they're not. And it's like this is the point. This is the point over here.
Exactly. It's like, don't get lost in the weeds. We're not worried about the diagnosis.
Right. The point is, this is abuse, and you're being brainwashed and devalued and disrespected.
Yeah.
At the other thing, people are like, well, I don't know if I can leave. All of us, not people, but like me too. I don't know if I can leave because maybe I didn't get hit, or this isn't abuse. Why can't you leave if you're unfulfilled? Why can't you leave if you're being simply disrespected? Why does it even have to get to the point of abuse or narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis to leave,
It's hard, because I do come in from, I'm one of these super conscientious people, like super conscientious. And so for me, part of it is an integrity issue with myself, that when I make a commitment to something, I plan to stick. I mean, let's take let's be ridiculous for a moment, okay? That philosophy, which I hear you, and I wish I was a little more on that end, but we don't dare apply that philosophy, for example, to children. It gets hard, then leave. You give birth to a child who is maybe has a condition that makes them personality-wise hard to handle. Well, you have to like figure out how you're going to help them and them to be the best self. Is that fair to you? Absolutely not. Are they disrespecting you? Oh, I'm sure they are. Are they even maybe abusing you? Yeah, probably they are. But that's a commitment that you made when you went into that, having that. So to what degree should we apply that in relationships? I think it's on a continuum is where I guess I go. And I'm realizing that for me, I'm speaking for myself. I think for me, I made the commitment at a greater elevation of significance than I did myself. And I think it has to be something that I see more balanced, that I want to see through what I put my word to, but I also need to know that there needs to be a respect, and I need to be seen as a real person and considered in that relationship. And there's where I lost sight of that. I didn't do that. I was willing to sacrifice myself for the sake of the commitment I made. I'm not even talking about the person, just talking about my own my integrity. I was willing to sacrifice myself for my integrity. I'm realizing that I need to be more balanced around that. That part of my integrity needs to incorporate myself.
Right.
There's the piece that I didn't have. I had it more all or nothing. And what I'm realizing is some predatory people, not all people, but some predatory people will take that and then you exploit it. And that's what we got to watch out for.
I received a message once that I felt like helped me a lot, because I was that way when I was younger, and it was like a relentless effort. I will give you a relentless amount without even being considered back, while begging to be considered. But a few years ago, this man said to me, I like to give to givers. Because I feel like a lot of us go in this place, like, so I can't like have all this compassion and empathy, and I'm a giver, and like, so I'm being punished for being a giver. I have to suppress who I am. And I don't think you do. I think it's about being selective. Like, I give to givers. Yeah. I will consider you if I'm being considered too. Yeah. If my needs have become become a part of your needs and your priorities, and vice versa. It just needs to be reciprocal.
Yeah. Sandra Brown calls that blind versus earned trust. I love that. I do think, and you're right. I used to have blind trust.
Yeah.
Nowadays, now people earn my trust. And it can be unearned. I can take it back if I find that you haven't consistently continued to earn it. So to me, it's kind of this thing that I measure. It's not a once and done thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of like back up a topic, but I like what you said about these movements, because there is just so much evolution in the way we approach all of these things, and even just generationally from, like, I've heard this from my ex's mom all the time. People don't split up. Like, you guys all just get divorced and you all just are like, well, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on. And we have, like, her generation, we have this, like, we made this commitment, and my generation is very much like 97 or 93% of people are super toxic and unhealthy, and you don't have to, stay in that.
Yeah. We have to watch the pendulum. Mm-hmm. And either extreme is bad. Either extreme is not. I mean, if you go to one end, you say the person's a non-self. All that matters is the relationship, and the person loses themselves to the relationship. That's not healthy. The other is, what matters is me exclusively. And the minute the relationship is not fulfilling what I want, I'm out, because I'm not going to be in a toxic relationship or be exploited. Well, then you probably never got into a relationship. Mm-hmm. It's probably more of a situation than a relationship. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So so the healthy stance would be it's what interdependence, where I move in holding myself while being vulnerably sharing myself. But I think most of us really struggle to know how to do that.
Totally.
Yeah. Which is the big question. Could we figure out how to that?
Ow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's been a huge thing for me to try and learn after abuse. So I'm 3 years out of abuse. I took quite a while off dating, at least a year. And then the last couple of years I've dated, and it's, at first it is like no vulnerability, wall, no trust, right? Like extreme end of that version. Hyper independence, and then how do you get to that place, like you said, where I'm independent and sharing myself and being vulnerable, but not falling back into that codependency.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm not in a relationship, and I've not been in a relationship since I exited that last marriage. And what I'm focusing on is just doing this with my adult sons. Showing up when something gets scary, saying it out loud. When they make me angry, be angry with them. Working through conflict together, saying my feelings, being very vulnerable, all of that. I'm working on all of that with my sons. And interestingly enough, because one of the things that happened right after we lost their dad is our relationship fell apart. One of the sons didn't even speak to me for a full year. No contact, no texting, no email, no calls, nothing. And it was very painful for me. I respected it, actually. I didn't fuss at him about it. I just grieved it. But we now are super close, and we see each other a minimum of once a week. We hang out. We get together for every holiday. And yeah, I would say my sons are my closest friends at this point. And it's amazing because we've learned to create this space where they can be in their space. I can be in mine, meaning psychologically or emotionally. Yeah. We give each other permission. We respect each other. But it's taken work. It's taking chances and trying new things and being upfront about stuff. It takes a lot of work, but that's where I'm focusing on it is just with those who are closest to me.
Yeah. I love that advice. I give advice similar to that when it comes to boundary setting for the first time, doing it with somebody safe, or the first time you want to express a feeling after being gaslit for so many years. Yeah. Don't on the boss level. Do not go try and set a boundary with the boss level. It's going to be turned around on you, right? Like, go to somebody safe that will receive it well enough and like allow you to create that pathway and get that one successful attempt in.
Yeah. The other thing I tell people, do that, or go to somebody who's really super safe because they're no one to you.
Yeah.
Like the gas cashier station, or a stranger. Learn to set limits with people that you'll never have to see again.
Yes.
And then practice, because you don't have to live the consequence of that limit. but get better at just saying it. I agree. I totally agree. We have to practice in the small pieces to get better with the big ones. But leave the big ones alone until you're ready. That's what I tell them.
Learn to walk before you run.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say something else about it. Oh, and the other thing is, it's really important to separate your identity from the situation. More importantly, separate your identity from their response. Okay, you're gonna put this out there, whether they respond good or bad. Like, you did what you needed to do for yourself. You said it out loud, and you can almost tune out now. If it starts to go bad, just tune out.
You're really talking about something tough. So yeah, let me put it psychologically. You're saying that we learn to be self-affirming. Most of us don't get there. Most of us, you know, when we first are born, you're other affirmed. Your mother says, oh, you're wonderful, I love you. She counts your toes and kisses you, and your poop doesn't stink. She affirms your value, your worth. And then we slowly over time incorporate that, internalize it in ourselves. But the hard part is, that's hard work. It's a hard work to do that. So I agree. That's the ideal, but realize that it's practice. You gotta, it's a muscle you have to exercise to begin to see yourself, affirm see your value, see that it's important. And so that when your partner or whoever is toxic is hurtful, you can say to yourself, but I see this. This is important. It's a process that we move from, oh, I'm only valuable when they see my value, to I'm valuable because I'm valuable and I see my own worth. I don't need it from outside me. But you're right. That's the most freeing spot. That's when we can really set the boundaries and walk away, because we know whatever the outcome, we're going to be okay.
And I will say, when it comes to doing that while in a relationship with a narcissist, it's going to be a lot harder to, like, I agree that you're 100% right. That's a skill that needs to be practiced and developed. And it's just going to be a lot harder to develop that when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, because the brain is the supercomputer, and the most prominent information that your brain is intaking is constant invalidation. Opposite of that affirming. So it's kind of playing against what you're trying to develop in your mind.
Yeah, it is. It took me hard work. I had to say to myself, I had to actually have conversations with myself, regardless of what he thinks, this is what you want, and that's enough. I had to say that. And it helped to help me hold the ground. One of the things that I used to do, here's a little tip that I used to do with myself. And it works, by the way. I know it sounds silly, but I used to imagine that and I still do sometimes, that my backbone is made out of steel. And I would say, I'm planning myself on this topic. I'm planning myself on this position, and I'm steel. It's not going to move off this position. And just having that visualization, helped me hold it. Then I could say, remember, you planted yourself, you're into the ground on this issue. And then I was able to not waffle so much. It just stabilized me.
That is such good advice for anyone having a conversation with a master obfuscator or a narcissist, going off on the word salad and deflecting the tangents, flipping it around on you. You're cemented into, I came to talk to you about this, and I'm not talking about anything but this.
Yeah. You don't even need to get good at tactics, honestly. Yeah, Kate and I, see, I did it. Kat again and I talk about a lot of tactics, but the most I'm going to call you Katherine, just because that's how I feel.
Katherine.
Sorry, I feel so stupid. But Katherine and I talk about a lot of techniques to use. I think it really comes back to this, and that is all you have to do is set your ground. If you hold the ground and remember what it is you start talking about, no matter what they say. This is what I did at one point. One of the really bad moments when I was trying to stick up for myself, he was all over, he gaslit me, then he lied, and then he threatened me, and then he started using intimidation and did more gaslighting. I just kept saying, I don't know what I think, but I do know this, and this is what I saw. I saw this. And I just kept saying, I saw this. I saw this. And believe it or not, just holding that, it broke apart everything he was attempting to do. And it took a long time. And hours later, he came back and like, okay, what if I tell you the truth now? So you don't need to be great at gray rock, and you don't need to be great at handling Darvo or all the other stuff that we talk about. If you could just don't move off your position, you'll win, because they can't hold it that long. They'll eventually relinquish. So but it's hard. This stuff is hard work.
It's so hard. One of my early videos, I went in and I was talking about how to remain on track and how to just like go in there with it in your mind. And I use the example Tuesday. You can like see me in the video, like I'm here to talk about Tuesday. And you just in your mind, you're like Tuesday, you know, and they're over here and they're over here. And then you're just like Tuesday. And that video, people are like bursting out in tears. And I had a woman actually send me a picture of a wine bottle called Tuesday and a set of keys. She moved out and she was celebrating in her new home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. Hold your ground. Just hold your ground. Yep. Your backbone is steel. It's made out of steel and it's strong, and you can hold your ground. Well, this has been a lot of fun today. I'm glad we've gone live together. This has been great.
Me too. I am too. We should definitely do this again.
We should. Yeah. And if you guys aren't following Katherine,
Kleis, Kleis.
Okay. And then I'm Kerry McAvoy, PhD, on all my platforms as well. And you have anything that they should be aware of that's coming up that you're doing that you want to make sure they're...
Well, yeah, I actually am launching my YouTube starting January 2nd. So the first Monday in January, I believe that's the 2nd. I'm going to have YouTube videos coming out 3 times a week. And then I'm hoping to get a newsletter out here in the near future with just different resources, things to reflect on for the month, and different, like I said, resources, books, podcasts, places you can go for more information.
Yeah. Well, my big one is Lundy Bancroft. Anybody of you are in an abusive relationship with a man and you want to understand why he's angry and controlling and really kind of unpack the profile, unpack how it affects you and the family, please come to the live webinar on February 9th. At 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's 90 minutes, and you get to ask your questions of him in the last 30 minutes. So he changed my life after that relationship. He really normalized what happened, helped me to understand more of why it happened, what was going on in the mind of those who are being abusive. And so if you are any of space like that, the tickets right now are still at the lowest price. It is $30. It's going to go up here in another week or two to $35. Please jump in and get it now. It's going to be an amazing webinar. I mean, I'm super excited. I am super excited about this. So,
yeah. That sounds...
yeah. I hope you do come. So, yeah. And I'm doing a new live thing on my lives on TikTok. I won't be able to do it on Instagram, but on TikTok on Thursday, starting January 12th, I'm going to be doing actually like a somatic reconnection with ourselves. So it's going to be a leading kind of like a guided meditation experience to help us heal from a bottom up level. Because what happens in trauma is that our sense of self in space, even our emotions go offline. We learn to numb out and check out. So I'm going to be doing a guided live experience with that. And if you want to be a guest and experience that, go through it in public with other people, please sign up through the link in my bio, and the audience will get to do it. They can go along and do it with us. So I'm super, super excited about that. And that launches on January 12th. It's called Mind Body Reconnection Experience. And we'll be doing it every Thursday. And each Thursday, the exercise will be a little different. Some of it will be more just sense of self in space. Some of it will be sense of emotions, getting more in touch with that. Others may be kind of learning to ground yourself. So it's going to be kind of different focus, helping us heal at a very deep kind of neurological level. So yeah, both of those are links in my bio.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All righty. Hey, you have a good rest of the day and a good weekend. We're heading into the new year. Happy New Year's to you.
I'm so excited for the new year. Happy New Year.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you guys so much. It was great. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Okay.